And this matter comes before the court today on plaintiff's motion for distribution of settlement proceeds and Mr. Sham's objection to that. So, Mr. Robbo, would you place your appearance on the record, please?
Yes, Your Honor. Reno Yerbo on behalf of the state.
All right, and Ms. Fazio.
Sarah Fazio, Your Honor, on behalf of Teresa Duchamp.
All right, thank you. And the issue that occurred to me as I reviewed the pleadings last night was, or the question was, is this the sort of thing where I need to determine the fairness of the distribution, or is the proper procedural and legal posture here to dump the entirety of this back into the estate of Benjamin David Brown in the probate court and have the probate court make a determination about the division? And it appears to me, at least my very cursory reading of the wrongful death statute, that at least I might have the power to make the division myself. It occurs to me that that's certainly something the probate court does much more routinely than the circuit court is, a dispute between prospective beneficiaries of an estate. But is this different because it's a wrongful death case? I guess I'll let Mr. Rabo lead off with that.
Yes, Your Honor. I agree with your interpretation. I believe that you have the power to do so.
Okay, I might have the power to kick it down to the probate court as well,
Right.
But I don't maintain the habit in mind of, if I can make a decision and it's, legally within my jurisdiction, I usually try to decide because I know my fellow judges on the probate court aren't any less busy than I am, and I never labor under the fact that, boy, they're looking for things to do over there, especially since I've gotten relatively familiar with the case over the time I've presided. So, what is your position on that, Ms. Fazio?
Your Honor, I do think that you have the authority under the wrongful death statute to determine the distribution. You also could kick it down to the probate court. I think that's a separate issue, though, from whether the estate is entitled to a distribution because of the 8 days of pain and suffering, conscious pain and suffering that the decedent had before his passing. So if there's a distribution to the estate, obviously that will flow through the estate under normal estate procedures.
Okay, and can that still be given the posture of the case? Because didn't we put on the record at the time of the original settlement that there was no distribution here for conscious pain and suffering? Is that accurate, Mr. Rabel?
Yeah, I know the settlement was approved. And now we're just dealing with distribution. I don't know. I don't
In
think
other
that.
words, I may not have made a determination as to conscious pain and suffering if that was part and parcel of the settlement or not. Usually that's done at the approval of the settlement number phase, but my memory is insufficient as to what I said or what we placed on the record back when I approved the settlement. And I don't recall, saying with, definitively that there was conscious pain and suffering. So, what's your position on the potential allocation of some money from the settlement to that for distribution by the estate?
Yeah, I believe there was conscious pain and suffering, and I think, we're here today to divide up the money that was already approved between the, either the 4 individuals or the 3 individuals.
Sure. And in other words, I could say today then that 8 days of conscious pain and suffering certainly has a value to it. And I could say that amount then is going to be paid into the estate. And that amount then would be determined for distribution by the probate court.
Yes, Your Honor. I don't think you made a determination at the settlement approval
Okay.
hearing.
All right. No, that's helpful. Do you agree with that, Ms. Fazio, that I made no determination previously on conscious pain and suffering?
Frankly, Your Honor, I wasn't at the last hearing. I just filed an appearance, so I can't say for certain whether you did or you didn't. But from what I reviewed in the order, in the motions before the court, I believe you did not. I don't have a transcript. But the motion itself asks for distribution percentages, and it basically says 0% to the estate or nothing to the estate. And I don't know if that was determined. It's part of the who gets what portion of the distribution of the settlement proceeds. So my understanding is that you did not rule on that, but again, I wasn't there.
Yeah, no, and right, and obviously if it goes to the estate, then that opens the possibility of any beneficiary or potential claimant against the estate um, obtaining part of that money. So, and I guess in tangentially, it is somewhat related here because that money would be available to your client to apply for, but equally available to the other yeah, claimants here today. So, in many ways, that determination is tied up with my decision on distribution. And remind me again of that, or can we even talk about it on the record, or is it a confidential settlement amount, Mr. Rabel?
Confidential, Your Honor.
Okay, so let's see here. Well, I think we can talk about, however, an apportionment of a portion of the settlement for conscious pain and suffering to the estate. Um, do you have an opinion, Mr. Rabel, how much that would be?
Percentage rise, Your Honor?
Why don't you just give me a dollar figure? That'd be easier because I can't remember the total dollar figure here, and I'm scrambling through my exhibits. Of course, I don't have the. Did you file the confidential exhibit again?
Yes, Your Honor, with for the first hearing I did, Your Honor.
You- Yeah, I don't, unfortunately, what I've got is your most recent filing, and I don't think I got the confidential exhibit again, so that puts me in a handicap position of not remembering exactly the total amount here. So I think we're going to talk about, well, a discrete amount. Uh, and I guess if you're more comfortable putting it in a percentage, we can deal with that. But you know, I do need to make some sort of determination. And my feeling is it'd probably be easier for everyone if I made that a dollar amount rather than a percentage. But you can address it whichever way you think's appropriate.
Your Honor, would you like me to send you an email with the confidential
Yeah, why
exhibit?
don't you email that? That would make my life about a million times easier because then at least I got a starting point.
Will do, Your Honor. Just give me one moment.
Okay. All right. And what percentage or, you know, do you think I should apportion, if any, to conscious pain? Well, you said there, you think there is probably some that should go to that. What's a appropriate percentage?
Yeah, 20%, Your Honor.
Okay. All right.
Your Honor, would you like me to make my argument now?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll just start with Miss Culbertson, Melissa Culbertson. She's Benjamin's full sibling. Um, they spoke every single day, multiple times a day. This is confirmed by deposition testimony. This is confirmed by medical records. That's all attached to my briefing that you received, Your Honor. Uh, when Benjamin was admitted to training leave, Melissa would pick him up for lunch, take him shopping. They would have family visits. Benjamin spent a lot of time with Melissa's kids. Melissa's father was sick and living in Melissa's home. She would pick up Benjamin. They would spend time with his sick father before he passed. Um, Again, you're on attached medical records, clinical records that show, back in 2022, my sister answers the phone every time I call her. She was listed as um, the sibling with authorizations to make decisions on behalf of Benjamin. Um, Benjamin listed Melissa's daughter in his safety plan as a reason to live, right? He was very, very close with not just Melissa, but Melissa's children. Um, he would always mention it in the medical records, and that he's so excited to see Melissa and her family. She was there with him when he was on his deathbed. And after he passed, she's the one who handled all the funeral arrangements, all the funeral payments, and I attached that, Your Honor, and you saw those records as well. She's a personal representative. She's been involved in this case. She's been working, weekly with me. I've had multiple conversations with her throughout this entire period. She suffers from, she's in therapy now. She suffers from PTSD from this, horrible thing that took place. That Melissa and Benjamin were very close. That was her number one. That was his number one person to call and speak to when he's having good days and when he's having bad days. Even David even testified, Melissa was Benjamin's home base, and they talked all the time. They were always together. Your Honor, there's no dispute that, Melissa deserves her 1/3 share. And then obviously, Your Honor, if you'd like her to speak, she'll love to talk as well, but I'll go through the siblings first if you'd like that.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that?
So then the next sibling, Your Honor, is David Brown. They're half brothers, but he testified, we don't consider each other half brothers. It was never like that. David came into Benjamin's life when Benjamin was a newborn. So he's known Benjamin his entire life. It's not a situation where he's 20 years old and the family's got married. David's been in Benjamin's life their entire life. Benjamin lived with David for a couple years in their adult lives as well. David had his own flooring business that Benjamin worked for. He worked with him when he was a teenager, helped him out during that time. David plays guitar. He's in a band, and he really bonded with Benjamin over music. That was a big part of their connection. They would always talk on the phone, talk about music. They would play music together. They would talk, once a week, just about music, just about what Benjamin's going through. They would always call when Benjamin was at Turning Leaf. One of Benjamin's last calls was to David. They just talked, just to catch up. Of course, he was there during the whole time that Benjamin was in the hospital. He was present when he took his last breath. They had family gatherings that David was always involved with when Benjamin was there. And he testified, I miss him dearly. We had great love for each other. He's been part of his life his entire life. So that's David Brown, Your Honor. And then Frazier Brown, very similar. He's the oldest sibling, so he's been around since Benjamin was born, Your Honor. So again, they don't consider each other half siblings. Frazier's been there the entire time, throughout Benjamin's entire life. Lived with him for multiple years when he was growing up. He testified, I was the oldest brother. Benjamin could always count on me to call and look out for him throughout his entire life. Again, just like David, Frazier, was a musician. They played in a band. He would always bring Benjamin over to play guitar and play with his friends. He'd always be around them, just listening to music, playing music with them. That's how they connected. Again, when Benjamin went to Turning Leaf, Frazier would always call him. They always had nice, positive conversations. He testified, we were always positive with each other. Every time we talked, it was always the same, regardless. Before and after he was in Turning Leaf. They had family gatherings all the time where, Melissa would pick them up, take them home for Thanksgiving, Christmas, summer day trips to the family cottage, multiple times just at Melissa's house, right? And that'd be Melissa, Frazier, and David. Your Honor, Teresa would not be involved in those family gatherings, to my understanding, Your Honor. And again, same thing, Your Honor. Frazier was there at the hospital and throughout the entire time. And so I believe all three of them deserve the 1/3 share, Your Honor. And just when it comes to Teresa, Your Honor, no medical records indicate any that she's a support system for Benjamin. There's no authorizations that she's been a part of that. She in 2022 annual report, her address was listed as unknown, while like Melissa's was known and current and indicated as she's the authorization. She has not produced any phone records, text messages, anything to indicate how close she was to Benjamin. As you saw, Your Honor, I produced a lot of phone records, text messages, Christmas cards, just notes from Benjamin to Melissa and David and Frazier. Teresa hasn't produced any of that, Your Honor. She admitted that she knew about this lawsuit. She received it. She called my firm, asked if she needs to do anything. And then when I took over this case, a year ago when I joined this firm, and when we started preparing for depositions, I understood there was a fourth sibling that was not involved. I called her, left her a voicemail, Your Honor, and as the officer of the court, I can represent that I didn't make that call. Can't find the records, Your Honor, because it's a year ago, but I did. Plus, she knew about it. She never once reached out to my firm or myself after her initial call, never asking for an update on the status of this case or what's going on or how can she participate. David, Melissa, and Frazier all took depositions, were involved with myself, and she never reached out to try to be involved. And I sent, of course, I did my job. I sent her the motion to approve settlement and all that to make sure she's aware of all that. And then that's when she became involved. Melissa testified that Teresa was not as close to the family. David and Frazier did the same. She didn't attend these family gatherings I've been discussing. She was present at the hospital, Your Honor, but that was the first. It's my understanding that was the first time she was around for a while, Your Honor. And Your Honor, I can answer questions, and I'm sure, Melissa, Frazier, and David would also like to talk as well.
Okay, well, let me hear the argument from Ms. Fazio, and then if I need to take any supplemental testimony, because I do have the documents you provided and also other docs. So I'd like to hear from Ms. Fazio what her client's argument's going to be here. As to these, the two claims, and start from the supposition, Ms. Fazio, that at least do you agree with the 20% allocation to pain and suffering of the total confidential settlement amount?
It's hard, Your Honor, it's so subjective, but 8 days of pain and suffering is significant.
I agree.
I
Yeah,
I would venture to guess it'd be more like 50%. But I'm gonna leave that to the discretion of the court. I do believe that the estate should get something because of the conscious pain and suffering. I think that's appropriate under the case law.
and of
But
course,
I
once
think
it
it's
goes
higher.
into the estate, it becomes a big question mark because it's subject to all claims of the estate, whether there are, whatever claimants might be out there. It's kind of an unknown in the probate world as to who might claim. I mean, we could suppose that the claimants will be the same as are here today and say we're entitled to a portion of that and advance similar arguments based on their connection to the decedent in probate court, but really that's an unknown. Once it pays into the estate, it becomes subject to the probate distribution rules, and I don't have any control over it. Although I would agree it would be a logical thing for me to assign, and I would agree 8 days of conscious pain and suffering. There certainly is an argument that perhaps that's more than 20%. Of the damage amount here, given the fact that, it's kind of undisputed that this young man did spend a significant amount of time comatose and severely injured in the hospital, following this tragedy. So, I think there is an argument that, yeah, somewhere between 20 and 50%. Now, I guess the next question then becomes, Ms. Fazio, if I award that and your client does have the right, and I'm not even going to venture to what the probate court might do, or how much, potentially that award might be, I take it your client still would want to assert a claim today for some of the proceeds of the distribution.
Absolutely, Your Honor. And I think it's interesting to note, my client is asserting that 4 siblings should share equally in the proceeds that are distributed to siblings outside of the estate. She's not here to denigrate her siblings. She's not here to say things about them that are disparaging in any way. She is his half-sister. She was very close to Benjamin. There is a history between Ms. Culbertson and my client that is not so stellar. They don't get along for whatever reason. I think that was exacerbated when their father passed away. And she pointed out some issues with a will with their dad, which is not before the court and doesn't really pertain to this matter, Your Honor, except to the effect that it did create some bad blood between the sisters. And so because of that, my client believes that because she doesn't get along with her sister intentionally omitted her from participating. These statements that Teresa did not attend family gatherings, she hosted family gatherings. I think that what's really, and I can start from the beginning of the relationship, Your Honor, but I think what's really important to note is, for instance, this 2022 proof of service that Attorney Arabo pointed out, saying Teresa's address is quote unquote unknown, is absurd. My client has lived in the same house for 15 years. Ms. Culbertson's been there. She's visited there for family holidays. My clients had the same telephone number for over 25 years. In November of 2022, just prior to the year that Ben passed away and their father passed away, she texted her at Thanksgiving. We have text messages from Thanksgiving indicating she knows exactly what her telephone number is. She doesn't serve her with process for the same reason that Ms. Culbertson never refused to tell Teresa where he was living at that time. She asked repeatedly, hey, where is Ben? And she's like, oh, he's in an AFC home. I can't remember where it is. I don't know. Call me later, but would never give her Ben's contact information. But despite that, Your Honor, my client maintained a close relationship with her brother, Ben. When in 1981, my client was 12 years old, and her brothers obviously were from a different mother. Their mother passed away. They moved to Grand Rapids. They moved in with their dad and their stepmother and their younger sister and brother, half sister and brother technically, but they, again, just like the brothers, they view Ben as a full sibling. And Teresa was the only girl. Teresa was asked to be a caregiver to Ben and Melissa, and Ben was just a baby at the time. She spent several years, or 2 years at least, in the home, taking care of her little brother and helping raise him, until my client was removed by Child Protective Services from that household for child abuse. And despite the fact that she had been removed for some child abuse incidents between stepmom and dad and her, she maintained a close relationship. There were CPS mandated visitation, and Ben and Melissa both attended those visitations with her. I think she'll note, if she's happy to testify, I think she's eager to testify, that their family structure was less than ideal. And she doesn't believe that any of the 4 of them escaped that toxic family cycle. And she understands that, and Ben as well, I guess there's 5 of them. Ben maybe in particular didn't escape that toxic family cycle, and it's affected him his entire life. After Ben moved out of the home, I mean, her brothers, Frazier and David, moved out before they were 21, or I'm sorry, before they were 18, or around the age of 18. My client was kicked out, or in CPS custody until she reached the age of 18. My client had her son Ian when she was 18 years old, and she brought Ian and Ben all over the place. They went to McDonald's, they went to outings, they were kind of raised, and they were almost like cousins, Your Honor. They were raised very close to one another. And Ian, her son, also works for the flooring company that Ben worked for and that David Frazier worked for. And he was working there when Ben had his incident. And that's who called her and let her know what happened. Ben lived with her and her husband and her children for a couple of years in the early 2000s. Ben became very transient. He would just show up at their home and stay with them for extended periods of time. They would take vacations with him. They brought him up north. That was kind of their thing. They brought him to air shows. They brought him to family outings. He was very close to her children. He's quite a bit younger, but he was closer to the age of her boys. Your Honor, it's unfortunate that the bad relationship between the personal representative and my client has resulted in this. But the reality is the personal representative isn't acting in this case in her individual capacity. She brought this case as personal representative of the estate. And in her counsel filed an appearance on behalf of the personal representative of the estate. And Your Honor, that there's a fiduciary obligation that Ms. Culbertson and her counsel both have to set aside whatever personal animosity they may have and advance the interests of the estate and the heirs of the estate. I mean, there's case law. And I mean, I know there's I think it's the Steinway versus Johnson case, Your Honor. Michigan Court of Appeals says if an attorney is acting on behalf of a personal representative of the estate, they have to be mindful of all of the beneficiaries of the estate and act in their best interest. The fiduciary obligation that Ms. Culbertson has to the entire estate, including Teresa, is codified by law. It's MCL 700.3703, and the definition is an MCL 700.1212, I think 1. That she has a fiduciary duty to all of the heirs and to set personal animosity aside and to advance the interests of all the heirs of the estate. So I think that has become an issue here, Your Honor. But to say that my client didn't have any contact with her brother, she understands that Melissa was the guardian and everything had to flow through her. And Melissa was doing her level best to ensure that Teresa didn't have contact with Ben. But Ben didn't live with Melissa. And Ben was a little bit transient, as I think we all know. And he would show up at her house and he would visit her frequently. She found out about his illness, his COPD. She found out about his cancer diagnosis, his lung cancer diagnosis, directly from Ben. And in the months leading up to his death, he confided in her about his COPD diagnosis, I believe at Thanksgiving in 2022, the few months before he passed away, less than a year. She found out later that his stage 4 diagnosis, again, from Ben directly himself. She had a very close relationship with him. She loved him dearly. She's haunted by his death. She was called immediately and she went directly to Butterworth Hospital and she found out he was in the ICU there. As our pleading represents, when she got there, she leaned over his body, she hugged her brother, and Ben said to her, "I love you, I love you." And at that time, she was there every single day. She went to see him when he was in the hospital at Butterworth daily. She was in the room with her brother, so was David, when Ben passed. And those moments haunt her every single day. She was getting emotional. Now, and I don't blame her. That's a difficult thing to watch. It was difficult to watch her brother decline over those 8 days. To have a doctor tell her that his brain bleed had developed and he was dying 2 days before he passed. And to watch him take his last breaths. She was there in the room with her brother at that time. She's not denigrating the involvement of her siblings. She doesn't, they have a vested interest in keeping her out because they get more money. But it's her position, Your Honor, that all 4 of them love their brother dearly. They miss him dearly. And there's, some people have more or less daily contact with a sibling, but that doesn't mean it affects them any less. And for that reason, Your Honor, she wants to participate with her siblings on an equal basis. And noting that there's money that needs to go to the estate as well, obviously, but
Yeah, that's really an unknown at this point. If I assign a percentage to the state for estate, on one hand, I could say, well, of course, these people are all going to make their same argument, and the probate judge is going to make a similar determination. But on the other hand, the money that I certainly do have, is the immediate distribution, whatever is left after I make that pain and suffering determination. So, all right.
Your Honor, can I make one clarification?
Yep, let me bounce back to you, Mr. Rabel.
Yeah, I just want to make one clarification. I didn't mean to represent that my firm or Melissa didn't have Teresa's contact. I was saying the medical records indicated that the facility.
She was there. I don't think there's any dispute.
Right.
She was the guardian and person that
Right, Your Honor. I just want to make that clear. I wasn't trying to represent that. I didn't have it. She indicated she received a complaint. She admitted that. So I just wanted to make that clear, Your Honor. Also,
yeah, no, and my view, at least on this case, is, there isn't a, though, and legally, in a sense, Miss Duchamp did get her, notice of her interest in the distribution of some of this money in at the last second. It nonetheless got in, and that's why I'm considering it at this time. It would be a different story if that never got in and we were trying to do this years later and money's already been distributed and we're trying to go back and do it. That's almost impossible to do. But, now that we have it and the distribution still to be decided by the court, I think she got her claim in time. It wasn't procedurally as clean as anyone would have wanted it probably, but nonetheless, she did, the law had its effect, and that Ms. Duchamp had enough notice to know that this thing was going on, and got, what I think was, in her mind, some last minute notice that there was some money being awarded here in the legal process, but didn't make her, make everyone, including the court, aware of her interest in some of the proceeds. And I think that's fundamentally what I'm here to decide. Why don't you take on the pain and suffering distribution first? I mean, again, and I'm somewhat at a disadvantage here in that, I didn't see Ben in the hospital. I, have only read the accounts here, and every account I've read paints a picture of a tragic situation, a family that experienced some early distress. This young man, Ben, who suffered, anytime CPS is involved and kids are removed from families, having presided over those cases, I know that creates, it's, I attended seminars where they said, hey, when you remove a kid from a family, it's equivalent to a death in the family, for everyone involved, the siblings, and the parents and the kid, you've got to really take that under consideration as the judge. How much trauma to impact a family. So family had family trauma long before, this case came to be. And nonetheless, these siblings, although of different ages and different degrees of, blood relationship to each other, as the families tend to be able to do, stapled something together and built relationships with each other that, proceeded despite perhaps the fact, that the parents, in Mr. Duchamp's case, were outright abusive towards her. And, in a situation like that, I know that creates disruption and distress through the rest of the family. So nonetheless, they, in their own ways, made some relationships. And Ben, unfortunately, uh, I can say I've also been to those seminars where they say, hey, when you remove kids and families are disrupted by this, that creates these at-risk situations for every kid in the family. So, everyone involved in this process has been, including Mr. Sham, subject to significant emotional distress because of a very difficult upbringing that they had absolutely no say in whatsoever. They were kids. You don't get to pick your parents or pick your family situation. You just get you're set in it, and you deal with it. And to everyone's credit, they dealt with a tragedy here in the best way that they could. So we've got this young man. He's got, unfortunately, it sounds like a very grim medical situation leading up to his death, and also, a very hard psychological situation where, he's got that pre-existing stress from his family. He's got more stress that's come up, and again, no one has control over COPD and cancer. Those things impact people, and no one's fault that, and certainly he didn't sign up for him either. So he's facing all of this, and attempts suicide unsuccessfully. Ultimately successfully, but suffers for 8 days, and what I've always viewed in as a comatose situation. I would assume medicated and not communicated, because all the communication appears to have gone through Ms. Culbertson, as the guardian in that case. Um, in terms of his maintenance at the hospital. And after 8 days in worsening conditions, he dies as effect of the suicide attempt, not as of the cancer or the COPD or anything else. But, he did die because he did. So thus it is related to this case. In other words, the fact that he suffered in the hospital and died. And how do I Ms. Fazio suggested 50% might be a number. You suggested 20%. How do I apportion that? And frankly, in a case like this, where part of the awards to the estate, and clearly, however, fortunately, Ben didn't have kids and things like that who are out there needing, at least as far as I've been made aware, who are going to need to rely on this sum of money for support for the duration of their lives or something along those lines. The claimants here, none of them, fortunately, it doesn't appear, were utterly dependent on Ben for their financial wherewithal. Therefore, there's an argument that perhaps, is right, a significant chunk of the money, perhaps even as much as 50%, ought to go into that pain and suffering bucket. I know there's a different tax treatment, of course, for pain and suffering money as opposed to other money, and I could be entirely wrong about that in the context of wrongful death. You're probably in a way better, but I'm not going to even consider that. I'm just going to make a factual determination as to pain and suffering. How do I get to that, Mr. Rebel, reasonably?
Yeah, I mean, I believe you have a good handle on the case and what he went through. I still think 20%, but and I'll leave it to your court's discretion, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. No, that's fair. And the second part I'm going to ask here, and I've considered, well, I could have people testify. I really don't want to reopen old wounds. I mean, I think that between your briefing, Ms. Fazio's briefing, and her statements on the record today, and here's my sense, is that, and part of this comes, gee, I'm a member of a family, and I've got 10 kids, and, I'm totally aware that family dynamics are unpredictable. And this was a family that experienced significant trauma that wasn't a fault of any of the people sitting in this hearing today. Like I say, you don't pick your family situation when you're born. You just deal with it going forward. And it appears to me that there is significant conflict between Ms. Duchamp and the three claimants into the estate. But what I am trying to reconcile that with was, of course, that it didn't necessarily extend to Ben. That she had a different relationship with him. She was significantly older than him. And I'm fully aware that when there's tension in a family, even though the tension wasn't directly with Ben, well, because of the family dynamic that's underlying and who's staying with who at the time and working for who, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that can result in less contact, not because Ben and Miss Dusham didn't feel close to each other, but just because there's too much tension with other family members, and everyone decided, well, I'd love to maintain, and it sounds like Miss Dusham did try to maintain as best she could a more, distant relationship with Ben, recognizing that there is this ongoing tension with the other um, family members that are claimants here. How do I sort that?
Your Honor, I mean, there's been no, sister counsel indicated text messages, stuff like that. They didn't produce anything, Your Honor. There's been nothing under oath. I produced Christmas cards, notes, text messages, phone calls, everything between the three claimants that I'm representing, Your Honor. And they haven't produced anything, Your Honor. We haven't seen one piece of evidence to indicate how close they were. And I know my Melissa and her brothers will testify, and they did testify differently. But there's been no evidence that of these family gatherings that Teresa was a part of, and I can't sit here and say
Yeah,
right or wrong.
was it conflict with
You're,
Ben or was it conflict with the others? Well, this is the hardest way to figure that out. Perceptions may be we got four different people involved, and there may be four different perceptions of why that divide occurred. So, okay, well, I mean, it occurs to me you have documented, and I will say right on the record here, just in a legal sense and. A practical sense, I don't think there's any dispute that Melissa Culbertson was the point person, not just for purposes of the lawsuit, but also as the guardian for Ben and making these, horrible, weighty medical decisions when he's in his last days and hours. She was the point person for that. There's no dispute about that. And I don't think there's any dispute that she really carried the laboring or just because of that legal designation that everyone appears to have agreed to as Ben's guardian during the closing chapter of his life. That certainly entitles her to more, or a substantial share of the recovery, just because, yeah, there is no doubt, and I know, again, just common sense tells you that dealing with those huge painful medical decisions and then also sorting the bills and the hospital stays and the insurance and opening and closing a probate estate. It's just a lot of work, regardless of the motivation to do it, whether it's love or whatever else. There's no doubt about it that anyone tasked with those responsibilities for another person does a lot of work. So I think that's pretty clear. And I think if anyone is entitled to a larger share of the distribution, well, there's pretty clear evidence that Miss Culbertson played those very concrete roles here. The question is distribution among the rest of the claimants. And I think, possibly because I don't have as much record evidence here for Miss Duchamp, maybe the fastest way to do this is me to swear Miss Duchamp in and let her testify to at least that what Miss Fazio represented was true, maybe elaborate on that. I'll let you question her as well. And of course, Miss Fazio to follow up, and then maybe I can make a ruling. Does that make sense, Mr. Rabel?
well, Your Honor, if Ms. Duchamp's going to testify, I'd like my Melissa and her brothers testify as well.
Okay, no, I think that's fair. Although, again, rather than reopening 30 years worth of painful family history. I guess if there are things that Ms. Duchamp testifies to that they say are just outright lies or wrong, I'm willing to hear that. But nonetheless, I'd like to focus on just kind of the concrete relationship with Ben and how that got to be, because I mean, I think also it's entirely possible and probable here because of the strain between the three um, people that you're suggesting get money, Culbertson, Brown, and Brown, David Brown, Frazier Brown, that, they weren't aware of the relationship that Miss Duchamp maintained with Ben. It might have been quite separate from their relationship, and because of the strain, it might have existed. So I'll take Miss Duchamp's testimony first, then, since I have the least information from her, and then I'll allow your clients to testify. I am somewhat constrained by time today, and in some ways, the worst thing to do is to drag these things out any further than they have to go. But let's get as much, since we got everyone here today, let's get as much on the record as we can. Is that agreeable to you as well, Ms. Fazio?
Yes. I mean, would you like me to question my client first?
Yeah,
I would
we'll
agree
swear
with that,
Ms.
Your
Duchamp
Honor.
and
Yeah,
then,
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, Your Honor.
Yep.
I was saying I wouldn't feel comfortable cross-examining her. I don't want to, come across as I think she's lying because I just don't have
Sure,
that. So
and
I think it would
you're
make
in
more
that weird
sense.
position of you represent the estate in
Right, Your Honor.
broad terms. Obviously, Ms. Culbertson's been your go-to person for answers and things as the PR, but right, you got a different duty, and that's fine. I'll just take testimony from Ms. Fazio, and then I'll let you question your clients. I think I can make a ruling, and let's focus, of course, not on the family. I get it, family tension, dynamic division, but rather on Ms. Duchamp's direct relationship with the decedent Ben in this case. So, Ms. Duchamp, if you would raise your right hand, please.
You're on mute.
Yeah. And do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony today will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Ms. Duchamp, you're on mute.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep,
Okay.
we're fine now. And do you swear to testify the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And you can lower your hand, Ms. Fazio. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you please state your name for the record and spell it for the court reporter?
Teresa A. Duchamp, Ducham, Teresa.
Thank you. What is your relationship to Benjamin David Brown?
His elder sister, 11 years his eldest sister, and one of the loves of his life.
Do you have different mothers and the same father? Is that right?
Yes, we do. Our parents, Frazier, David, and my mother passed away in 1981. We came back to Grand Rapids, where we derived from, and we reunited with our biological father, Richard Brown. Now, he married our stepmother, Dawn, Melissa and Benjamin's mother, and we became a family unit in May of 1981.
All right, and describe your relationship with Ben when you were children.
Well, I was the caregiver immediately for my father and stepmother, and of course, because there was 5 of us, it was a big family, and our parents had to work, so I became Benjamin's primary caregiver. I carried him on my hip for nearly 3 years, and I did the same with Melissa. Fraser and David were there. They know that I also did that with them during their lives. And after I left, or I was taken out of the home by CPS.
And how old were you when you were taken out of the home by CPS?
15.
Okay. And did you still have visits with the family after CPS removed you?
Correct. The child haven and, that type of family like to get the family members back together. And it is primarily because of the siblings. The siblings do not understand that you're there one minute and you're gone the next. And this really affected Melissa and Benjamin growing up.
All right.
It really did.
And after you became an adult, did you continue your relationship with Ben, even though he may have still been a child at some of those times?
Oh, yes. I don't know if the times are different, but back then in the 80s and 90s, families just kind of stuck together, especially when you're orphaned. You only have your father, and then your 2 youngest siblings bond with you as babies and think that you've always been there. You don't do anything different but grow up together. That's what you do. You stick together. And Fraser is the eldest, right? But he didn't lead us. He helped, but he didn't lead us. I did. And they know it. They know I did. Every one of them lived with me until 15 years ago. So this is all new to me.
All right. Well, we're talking specific, we want to focus on your relationship with Ben,
Yeah,
just for
yeah.
the sake of time. Did Ben have a relationship with your children?
Yes, he did. He had even a relationship with my grandchildren. That's how close he was to us.
Did you
Yes.
take Ben on outings when he was a kid and you were an adult?
Yes.
What were those
Our
like?
primary outings were up north, we call it. We're even going there this weekend. Ben was part of that life for 20 plus years of going up north. We went on vacations, just all the fun parts, Michigan adventures, and Anywhere we went, if I could get a hold of him, he was with us.
When was Ben diagnosed with schizophrenia?
Late teens, early 20s, if even there, because my father would not accept it. He refused until probably 8 years into, maybe 6 years into the diagnosis.
All right, and did you support Ben through his mental illness?
Oh yeah, we didn't look at it as we don't look at Ben as mentally ill. We never have. None of us have. But
Describe
yes,
what you did to support him through those trying times for him.
the medications were just evil because they leave you only with fatigue. So a lot of that in the beginning, and he would take off for months and then come back, but he'd be in Ohio. So we'd go get him, and the medications he would get on and off, and that's typical for schizophrenics, so-called. But I thought the medications were killing him. And I hoped to tell him, they have new schizophrenia medications out like Condor and Abilify. And if he just could have held on, he could have held on and he would have been,
Did you help Ben procure Social Security benefits?
I did. Because my father was just, he was distressed. He didn't Ben wasn't pulling cranks or juvenile delinquent type evil things, but he was doing things that were just not considered normal in our family. So we all coveted him. We all did. Each of us are our own ages, and we all did our very best. Frazier, David, myself, Melissa especially, because Melissa grew up with Benjamin at his age. They're a year apart, but I'm 11. So I'm out. I already have a family. I have children. I have grandchildren. But Ben was like a sibling to even my children. So it wasn't like he came and knocked on my door. He just came right in.
Right. How often
Yeah.
did Ben stay with you and your family when he was an adult?
Oh gosh, years off and on. Any chance Ben could get when he wasn't going through a phase. So we do know, over 2 years for sure, but off and on through 43, years, or what, 40 years, 35 years, all the time. He went up north with us. He slept in our house with us. He lived with us.
Was there a period of a couple of years where Ben lived with you?
Yes.
When was that?
2002, 2004, 2003, because I have a art post of his date on it. So I remember that date for sure. So it was a couple of years.
And when he moved out around in 2004, did you keep in touch with him?
Oh yes, absolutely. His
how so?
entire life.
Did he visit with your family? Can you explain for the court what he did?
Yes, he did. Well, I threw all the Thanksgivings. I threw all the Christmases. I'm sorry, my name is Teresa and Brown Duchamp. As if I never even did anything with my family when I let it. I tried to keep us 5 together, but yes, Ben was with us probably a good 6 months before he passed away, off and on.
Okay. And then there's a point where Melissa, your sister, became Ben's guardian, correct?
Yeah, legal guardian was
Yes.
probably after my father passed away.
Was your dad guardian before Melissa was?
What's that?
Was your dad, did he ever serve as guardian before Melissa became guardian?
Yes. Ben, finally, my dad accepted Ben's illness and relationship. And Ben spent 8 years working alongside my father up at the cottage. So yeah, they became tight. And so Dad just took care of his bills, his guardian stuff, his SSI, his medications.
Yeah. So did you read the accusation in the personal representative's response to our objection that she was unable to serve you with a guardian ad litem report in 2022 because address was unknown?
Correct. That's correct.
What did you think of that?
Well, I'd already figured out what was happening all along because I didn't receive any documents but 2, and that my brother David kept telling me that I was done. About 2 or 3 years ago, you're done, you're done. And I kept thinking, why are you threatening me? What is this about? And now it's all kind of illuminated that I was supposed to not even know about it. I was kept out on purpose. Thank you.
And I don't want you to get into any relationship with the personal representative or
Yeah.
Culbertson individually, but did that animosity between you and your sister affect your ability to see Ben while Melissa was his guardian?
Oh, for sure.
How so?
Correct. Because my sister, I'm not trying to, my sister loved Ben very much, but when it comes to money, she probably thought, oh, I'm going to lose his benefits, this or that, and pernicious jealousy. And it's over. Ben needed his family, all of us, at the end of his life. When he was terminal, he needed all 4 of us there. No discussions. We did it at our uncle's funeral, a little after Ben died. We did it at my dad's funeral. We set our differences aside. We did it at Ben's. We set our differences aside for the greater good of all 5 of us. We
Did you
stuck
ever-
together.
Did you ever ask Melissa where Ben was living so that you could
Oh,
visit
yes.
him? What happened when
Yes.
you asked?
She blocked me. She wouldn't take my phone calls. I tried to call David. He told me I was done. Explicit, calling me names, hanging up on me. And I'm like, what is happening?
Did you
Why?
Did you ask for his telephone number to be able to call him? And
Oh,
reach-
yes, correct.
Did they,
Because he had, but
was that provided to you?
no,
All right, so
not at all.
if there's sort of a record that indicates you haven't called him, is it because you didn't have his telephone number?
Well, he wouldn't carry a cell. He just wasn't material. But he had moved 3 times to Lansing, back into Kentwood, I believe, and then I think maybe went back to Lansing and back again. And then the turning leaf was the one where I didn't know where it was. I didn't have the name, and I asked for the everything and address, phone number, and I was denied.
All right. At some point, did your brother Ben tell you that he was sick?
Yes,
When was that?
Thanksgiving 2022.
All right, and you saw him in person at Thanksgiving in 2022?
Correct.
And
Yes, I did.
What did Ben say to you about being ill?
He said, Teresa, I'm sick. His parents, my dad and my mom died of the same thing, COPD, lung cancer, etc.
And
So
then,
when he told me, I was scared. I said, get a hold of me after the end, because we had 20 people, Melissa and I had set up our Thanksgiving family gathering. We had 20 people. So Ben was seated at her table, and then the rest at my table, 10. And after we were all done, I didn't get to see him leave or anything. He was gone.
and then after that, did he indicate to you that he had lung cancer?
Correct.
When did you
Actually,
after that?
in May of 2023.
Right before he passed away?
Correct.
And did he tell you what stage he was?
4.
All right. And he told you that directly, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then how did you, on July 8 of 2023, how did you find out about Ben's suicide attempt and hospitalization?
My son Ian had called me
And then
said, he said, Mom, Uncle Ben jumped. He needs you now. I'm on my way, I said.
where did you
So-
go to the hospital at that point?
Butterworth, downtown Spectrum Health, it was
When
called
you-
at the time.
Right. When you reached the hospital, can you describe for the court the conversation that you had with Ben and what condition he was in?
I said, I'm here now. I'm finally here. And he said, I love you twice. I love you. He just kept apologizing. I love you. I love you. I'm sorry.
Who was in the room at the time?
My cousin BJ, my husband, and Melissa was out in the hallway.
And from that point forward, how often were you at the hospital between the July 8 and when he passed away?
8 days,
Did you go?
every day. Every minute I could be there so I could hold him. I wanted him to feel me because he was intubated finally. And he was also had to have a lung hose put down for the cancer and blood he had in his lungs, walking around with that. And so I just was every day. And Missy, I saw her only twice. Dave was there steadfast.
No,
And so was our, go ahead.
so describe his condition in those 8 days. Did he moan? Did he squeeze your hand?
Oh, he was in such distress, and can you imagine the pain of having your every single bone in your body broken from your chest down? Imagine that. So he needed to be put in a medical coma for pain. He was intubated.
Did
Yes,
he,
it was.
go ahead. Was there
It
any
was,
moaning or indication that he
yeah.
was in pain?
Oh, yes. And he just had this cough, like he was so full in his lungs of blood that he breathed like a dragon. It was just so loud, like for 8 days. He just was hurting. You could see his eyebrows, how they move in that pain distress way. Yeah.
Did he respond to you when you held his hand?
Yes, in the beginning until he was intubated. And then, he would squeeze hands here and there. He would do that. But then he just, faded. It just got to where every day we didn't know he had a brain bleed. We didn't know. So he was lucid in the beginning and he was hurting and a great deal of distress and pain. I've never seen that in my entire life. And I don't ever want to see it again. Except I did because Frazier tried to commit suicide 3 months later and I was by his side. So
Can you tell the court about the day that Ben passed away?
David and I were there and it took a long time and I was angry because I didn't know how they knew, like the last minute. How did they know? But that was just with me. So David and I were there and my husband looked at us and said, hey, because his noise stopped, this egregious train sound, and it stopped. And my husband got up and left. And, from then on, Dave gently helped me get through it because I jumped on Ben. I didn't want, like I yelled out Ben, his whole full name, man. So Benjamin David Brown. But then he breathed in one more time and I held him and Dave said, let him go. And I did. I thought, we're going to hand you right back to mom and dad. And that's what we did.
And at that point, you knew he was going to pass, is that correct? Because they had removed life support?
Yeah,
And
that's right.
How long did you sit at his bedside after they removed life support before he passed away?
The whole time.
Do you know how many hours it was?
8 to 9. It took a long time. Through the night, I think it was 3 o'clock in the morning. So they took him off 8 o'clock. That's right. The night before, they took him off at like 8 p.m. So from 8 p.m. to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning is when he passed. I didn't look at the time. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. How had his death affected you after he passed away?
Well, it fractured our family. I didn't just lose him. I didn't just lose my father. All three of them sitting there threw me away like trash.
Do you miss Ben?
I do. I do.
Did you attend his funeral?
I did.
Did you assist Melissa in procuring a unit for Ben's remains
I did. I went down to Rosedale because we had just interred our father, 5 months before. So I went down there and was very fortunate to get the same one in our parents' mausoleum. So we took care of that. And, we assisted. Again, we put our differences aside. Dumb differences. These are childish differences here. What matters is when somebody's freaking dying and you're right there by them.
And let's talk just briefly about what you received regarding this case. How many times did you receive a package from Marco Law?
2.
All right, and the first one, I think, when did it show up? I think you said it was when the case was initiated. Did you receive a copy of the complaint?
I did.
Did you actually only receive every other page though?
Yeah, I
Okay.
did. That's
So
a
somebody
true
maybe copied
story.
double-sided paper?
I'm lucky I found it on my porch. So, I mean, yeah,
And what did you do when you received those
I
pleadings?
called the attorney firm.
And what did they say to you?
She told me that I would be receiving, documents forthcoming, because I even mentioned, oh, I'm sure it's going to take a while, because it typically does. And I just, okay, did what she said. I'll wait till your next documents come.
Did they ask you what you needed or what they needed from you?
No, they didn't ask me anything. No, they said,
Did
just
you
wait
look
for
at-
the,
Yeah,
pardon me.
go ahead.
Yeah, just wait for the next documents to come. Looks like
Okay.
everything's all, because what I got, the first was some sort of already commenced. Like the hearing was already commenced without my deposition and everything. And I'm thinking, huh? I don't know probate law. I'm bereft of it. And Judge Rossi told me to get an attorney, and that was right. I am very not good in probate law. So I only did what the paperwork said to do.
And did you provide your contact information to Marco Law at that time?
Oh yeah, because I made sure that she had my email address, because I changed it like 6 years ago or 7 years ago when we changed to Comcast. Yeah, so I got
Did you ever,
yeah,
did you ever get a notice of deposition?
no,
Did you ever get a phone call from anyone at Marco Law?
I did not.
And then when did you receive the next set of packages or information?
March 3rd or 4th or something like that, 6th. I found
Of this
another
year?
I went out in my porch and found another Marco Law document. The probate thing. So
Okay, and that was of this year, correct?
correct.
Okay, and did you again reach out to Marco Law?
I did, because I read it and I said, wow, wait a minute, what am I missing? So I did. Thank you.
Would you have been happy to provide deposition testimony had they asked for your deposition?
Via my correspondence with Mr. Arabo here, yes, I told them through many emails back and forth, what did I do wrong? What do you want me to do? What do I have to do? Where do you want me to go? So he has all the emails, because I said to him, I'm here now. Why are you trying to still obscure me? What's happening? Is this, I don't know probate law. I'm sorry.
I understand. No, that's understandable. I mean, you're a layperson, so what are you then asking the court to do with respect to the settlement proceeds?
Just be fair and equitable.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. And I don't have any questions. And Mr. Marco, you indicated you did not wish to cross-examine.
No, no, Your Honor. I just want to clarify a couple of things, and then I can ask questions of my clients if possible.
Okay, do you have questions then for Mr. Duchamp?
No, I don't, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, very good.
I just want
All
to
right.
clarify something with the court. Again,
Yeah.
Your Honor, I never indicated in my briefing or in front of Your Honor that I did not have Ms. Duchamp's address to serve her. I never indicated that. I said the medical records indicate that they didn't even have Ms. Duchamp's address when they.
No,
when
I
listed her
understand,
contact.
and I really view the notice issue legally. It's sufficient, and Ms. Duchamp's appearance is sufficient. So, and thankfully, part of this is not to evaluate, I mean, I think the underlying current there as well. Ms. Duchamp didn't participate in the lawsuit very much because she didn't have much of a connection to the family. Her argument is, well, I didn't really know very much about the lawsuit because I wasn't getting all the mailings that I needed to do that. And I can see that. And the bottom of the line is, participation in the lawsuit is the least consideration, that I need to make, factually in, coming to the conclusion of, what's the fair thing to do with the proceeds here. It really hinges on relationships that existed before the lawsuit was even filed. So, I mean, I notice is there, and I think I accept it as just factually as an explanation of why Miss Duchamp wasn't more involved in the suit itself. But as I said, that's a tiny or non-consideration in the determination that I need to make. So I understand what you're saying as well. And for everyone's reassurance, it's not a huge part of mine. As far as I'm concerned, it got teed up in time in front of me. I'm glad we're here now and not 2 years later after I've distributed money and the estate's closed. And then we're trying to do this in retrospect. That's nearly impossible. So I'm grateful that, even though we played catch up a little bit, we got here. So who would you like to call, Mr. Marco?
Your Honor,
Or Mr. Rabel?
I'll call Melissa, Your Honor.
All right, and Melissa Culbertson, would you please raise your right hand at this time? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony today will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Very good. All right, Mr. Rabo, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Culbertson, you took your deposition in this case, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you heard you read all the briefings. You heard what I said on your behalf today. I just want you to expand on what was said, talk about your relationship with your brother from the beginning to the end, and just let the court know if there's anything additional that I haven't said that you would like the court to know.
Yeah, I grew up with my brother. We were a year apart. We were best friends. I grew up being his advocate when he became sick. I was there for him at every hospital, every institution that he went through. I talked to him daily on the phone. We were very close. Like I said, I was always his emergency contact for the hospitals and the medical people. And after it was clear that he was doing things to try to harm himself, I petitioned the court to try to help and get a guardian. So I was a temporary guardian. I didn't purposefully omit anybody from getting notified of that. I provided the court everyone's address, including Teresa's address. And I became a temporary guardian until the court could appoint a full guardian. I thought that I was doing that in my brother's best interest so he couldn't use his money to harm himself. But still, my brother and I were very close. He was very close to both my kids, Dakota and Elliot. And I spent, there's a huge hole in my life from not talking to my brother. I talked to him daily and weekly, and I made all efforts to bring him around family gatherings. We had family gatherings at my house that Dave and Frazier came to. And it's unfortunate that Teresa was estranged from the family, but she was abusive to both me and my brother, and that is part of the reason why she was removed from the house when we were children. And we suffered from that until later in life, and Ben and I talked about that, and so things were mischaracterized in her what she talked about and what was actually the truth. Losing my brother when he got sick and he ended up in the hospital, I was there every single day too at his side. I was there minutes after he passed. I had to find childcare for my 6-year-old daughter at the time. And this has put a huge emotional strain on me and my daughter and my son. And it's been the most devastating thing that happened to me in my life.
Is there anything else that Mr. Sham testified to today that you disagree with?
Yes, there is a number of things that she was mischaracterized or was untrue about. My brother did not stay with her on and off for years. He stayed with her for a short period of time, and she collected his Social Security checks for himself, and she forged credit cards in his name. And my mom ended up having to help move my brother out, and because of her mental abuse towards him, he ended up inpatient because of it. And there never in a point of time was he staying somewhere. Did I purposefully omit where he was staying or his phone number or anything like that to her? I always, if any time anyone asked me where Ben was or how he was doing, I told them because I knew that Ben needed as much support as he could. And so I would supply phone numbers and addresses in case they were able to make time to go see him. Teresa never visited him at any of the AFC homes. She never visited him when he was inpatient. She never was there for him like I was.
Is there anything else you would like to say?
No, you're
Okay. Your Honor, now, if you'd let me, I'd like to talk to David Brown.
All right, Mr. David Brown, if you'd please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony today will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may proceed, Mr. Rabel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Same question to you, David. You heard all the arguments and you read the briefings. Just talk to me and let the court know about your relationship with your brother. Throughout the entire timeline. From beginning to end.
Ben was my younger brother. We, like Teresa said, we moved in with them when they were just 1 and 2. We grew up with them. We did have an unfortunate childhood, resulting being out of the house at an early age, but we also, had a close relationship with Ben. I did very much so because of music. He loved music, he loved art. So we had a lot of different relationships from some other siblings. Very close to him throughout his life. I've always talked to Ben, always was in Ben's life, toward in his whole life forever. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? I don't want to say he said, she said about what Teresa's relationship was. I think there's some things that she's saying that to make it better for her situation, but that's all I can say. For my relationship with Ben, we were very close. We didn't get to spend a lot of time when he did get sick. He was institutionalized in his life. So we spent a lot of time doing that. And the times that he was, he would call, we would come get him. He'd come over, he hung out. He did live with me in his adult life for a year or more, a little bit. We had a great relationship. It's unfortunate that the things happened in his life that happened. You know what I mean? He did get sick, and it was sad at the end. It very was, and I don't want to disassociate that, situation for Teresa or whatever she went through with, being at the hospital and everything that we went through. It's a sad thing. That's what's going on. And it's sad to be fighting about this. We did try to contact Teresa and try to let her be involved in the situation, and she totally denied the situation. And at the end of when she finally finds out about the situation, of course, she's trying to get involved. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't want to go back and forth and say this or that about any of the relationships that we had. I'm sure Teresa had a relationship with Ben, and it was, in their time, and it was good, whatever, like we all have. But I just think that, for any situation that we're dealing with, that my relationship with Ben was honest and great throughout his life, and I really don't have anything else to say on that matter, I guess.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to speak with Frazier now.
Very well. Mr. Frazier Brown, if you'd raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony today will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, and you may proceed, Mr. Ribble.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Frazier. You testified in this case as well. Your testimony is part of the record. You heard all the briefing today. And if you want to add anything to let the court know about your relationship with Ben and any disagreements you've had with any prior testimony, now's the time to do so.
Well, I don't want to take anything away from Ben, but one thing that Teresa did say, she is saying a couple untrue things. I never tried to commit suicide 3 months after Ben died. It's ludicrous. That's never happened in my entire life. So I have no clue where she even just came up with that. The second part, was the oldest brother. When we moved in and when we were, young, I did leave the house when I was 17. But like David, I was in music, and we contacted each other often, me and Ben, of course, every single holiday, all growing up through all the years. When he got older and was dating, I used to invite him over all the time to where I was at so we could hang out and whatever. Like I said, I was the oldest one, so probably the most one who was the furthest away from him, but I always did try to connect with him when I could. Like he used to like calling me. And that was probably, it would surprise me when he did call. And because it was things that, that I, as the oldest brother talking to him, it was, hard. It was being the youngest. I don't know. It's kind of hard to talk right now, going through this whole process. But like my brother David and Missy said, this whole thing has been terrible. And my sister Teresa was not part of anything at all in the beginning. And we were all got estranged from her for all different reasons, but she was the common denominator in a lot of things that went wrong, and up through our lives. And You know, it's really, like Dave said, really terrible for this. And this is one thing I wanted to avoid, exactly this right here, is going back and forth over, money that was left over from, our brother dying. So, I guess I'd just like to leave it like that.
Understood. I'm all set, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, very good.
Can I clear one thing up?
Yeah,
Just
go
really
ahead, Ms.
quickly.
Fazio. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think this just goes to the toxic family structure that the court's already noted. But when my client was removed from the home when she was 12 years old, Melissa Culbertson was 4. And so I think a lot of the information about why she was removed may have
No,
been
I agree. And like
adult.
I said, I've presided over those cases, and I can
Yeah.
just say from a legal perspective here, number one, 11-year-olds aren't supposed to be raising kids. It's supposed to be the parents. And when a case like that does come before the court, is it very common that the oldest daughter, particularly, gets saddled with the child rearing responsibilities? Absolutely. Are 11-year-olds equipped and 12-year-olds equipped, emotionally to raise young babies? Of course they're not. Anyone I can tell you that's a recipe for decisions. Is it the 11 or 12-year-old's fault that they're not a professional? Of course it's not. It's the parents' fault, because you're not supposed to delegate child rearing responsibilities to 11 or 12-year-old kids. You're supposed to take that parental role yourself. Is it okay to train up a 11 or 12-year-old and to help out the kid? Sure. But totally delegated, of course not. And so finally, when a case like that gets in front of a judge like me for resolution, we don't say, oh, there's the 14-year-old or 15-year-old abusing their siblings and we're removing them because they're at fault. We say what there is improper parenting or parental neglect going on there that allows that to occur in the household, not placing the blame on the kid, because as I said before, kids, and I don't have to tell the people sitting in this hearing today, you got zero say about when you're little, the family you're born into, the dynamic that occurs then, and until you become, an adult and you make your own decisions, you're very much at the behest of your parents, and that takes a lot of different forms. And I can say, the reassuring thing I've heard here is that, at different times, even despite the strain that's existed, and of course, we didn't talk about every source of strain today, nor should we, but the point being that the family has been able to come together and pull it together at some critical junctures, at funerals, at some family gatherings, at the last moments of Ben in this case, to be able to, um, at least coexist for long enough. Because, and I'll tell you, I've had cases with people in hospice where, there's been so much bad blood that there's actually like a fight in the hospital room, if you can imagine that, a physical fight, and that didn't happen here. Even you're able to put aside the differences that you had enough to come together at recognizing that here is a very important juncture for everyone in the family. Different reasons, and you're able to put aside your differences, and that's reassuring. So I'm grateful for that, and I think I've got enough information at this point to make a ruling in the case. So what I am going to do, and the other piece of this is. Ben, clearly, and I was grateful for Teresa's description. I've also sat with an old veteran who, when he was dying of COPD, it's a terrible way to die. And I can't imagine, the current effects of like being intubated and, suffering from these other injuries. And then on top of it, there's just the natural struggle to breathe that comes with COPD. And cancer, I have no doubt that there was significant pain and suffering prior to Ben's death. And so I'm going to make division of the award 40% attributed to pain and suffering. Everyone agrees, and pain and suffering is so subjective, but that's kind of a recognition of everything that Ben went through in this case, and the fact that he simply suffered at the end of his life. I think there's just no other way to say it than that. And, I did look at the hospital bills, and he remained alive in the hospital for 8 days. I think a 40% award can be justified by his entering the hospital in a semi-lucid state, worsening because of the brain injury and also because of the COPD, and heroic medical efforts to keep him alive and also keep him as comfortable as possible given the terrible injuries. And again, this was a suicide attempt by a jump off a high roof, is my understanding. So, he of course did suffer horrible broken limbs and also internal injuries from that fall. It just goes without saying there would be a high amount of conscious pain and suffering. As to the division of the remainder of the estate, as I said at the outset, I just know from a practical perspective and financial perspective that the guardian personal representative, Melissa Culbertson, winds up carrying a huge load in these cases. She did decision making medical during that last few days of Ben, and then she dealt with all the matters of making sure the medical expenses were paid. And I have, of course, a lengthy a document here indicating that she did so heroically and admirably as her brother was passing. And, it's also undisputed, just, again, just objectively, she was the closest in age to Ben. So naturally, they did have a connection. They grew up together, whatever trauma, was experienced in the family. They, would be a natural pair to kind of deal with it as siblings. They're very close in age, and that would be normal. And to Melissa's credit, she was there for her brother. As a child, it is, you're not conscious of it as a child. You're like, hey, you're kind of my size. Let's hang out together and be allies in this thing. And but later in life, when Ben really needed that, again, Melissa was there, present. So I am going to keep her distribution in this matter as recommended here at 1/3 of the amount to be distributed. So 40% is going to go to the estate for uh, pain and suffering, a third of the remainder to go to Melissa. As to the remaining siblings, two brothers who were also older, and then Teresa Duchamp, who was older, as I said earlier, drafted into the point of being a parent when she was way too young to, raise a kid. And of course, you can only learn about parenting from the parents you got. It's not as if 12-year-olds get a class in fifth grade or middle school that says, hey, here's how you raise a baby. That just doesn't happen. You're learning reading, writing, and arithmetic. You're trying to figure that out yourself. And having watched my own kids and trying to, give them some responsibilities with regard to their younger siblings. Do they make errors and need correction? Yeah, about every hour that they're in charge. I suggest something they could maybe do differently or more gently, just because that's not something that a young kid is ever expected to do. So and recognizing that that kid does when you're 11 or 12-year-old raising a little baby, well, if you get a lot of responsibility for the baby, it's almost like it's your baby. Even though of course it's not it's really your step sibling or whatever. But the 11 or 12-year-old does take a lot of responsibility, and I have no doubt that also that Ms. Duchamp maintained that connection and responsibility as best she could. Again, remembering here, what are we dealing with? Fractured family, a young man who struggled in young adulthood to be diagnosed with and ultimately with mental illness over the opposition of his dad, who said, no, he's not mentally ill. It just, if he was working alongside me, he'd be fine or whatever. And those dynamics are very normal in any family dealing with a serious medical crisis like a diagnosis of mental illness. Every family is going to struggle with different responses to that. So it's not unique to this family. It is just normal to have the different ways that people respond, and it's clear from that particularly during that young life when because Miss Duchamp was by then older herself, had her own kids, that she made a space in her life for Ben, and that later in life friction developed among the family for undoubtedly a bunch of reasons, and then there wasn't as close a relationship going forward, even though, from Mr. Shamp's perspective, she might have desired to have that, that didn't. And, I do have to say here too, to Mr. Shamp's credit, when you're um, have a family structure and you realize, hey, it's going to be contentious if I go to an event or if I show up for something, and you decide to step back from that, in a way, you're serving the family. Too, you're not saying I'm not going to be there, screw all of them necessarily, but you're saying, you know what, I might like to see, one or two, but I recognize there's also conflict with another sibling or two, and for that reason, I'm not going to go and make the event it turned into a dramatic confrontation or something like that. Just it's a way to keep family peace if someone voluntarily steps away from a family event or interactions that might cause conflict. So and of course, I'm in the least position of everyone sitting in the room to see what that dynamic looked like. You all know it much better than I do. I'm frankly just doing the best I can to make a reasonable award here. But I do think as to the remaining claimants, which would be David Brown, Frazier Brown, Teresa Duchamp, each of them, since I have awarded, kept the 1/3 award, should share equally in the remaining 2/3 of the distribution of the estate. Or of the settlement proceeds here. I'm not great at math. I do know that 2/3 is about 66%, and that'll be 22% plus to each individual claimant. I think in terms of coming to a conclusion here, that's a fair, they're entirely different relationships. Of course, the two older brothers, first of all, brothers are rarely saddled with that parenting responsibility. Just culturally, it falls to the woman, and it does make sense that it went to Teresa. And, the brothers acknowledged, hey, because of some contention in the family, they were out of the house fairly early in their teens as well. But to the credit, they also did guy things with their brother Ben, and it brought him to work and played music with him and, involved him in their lives too, and had that determination too. So, I want to give adequate credit across the board where it's due here, because we got fundamentally different people with very different relationships and a family dynamic that I can't even, begin to, um, fully understand myself, other than, I can say to all the siblings, first of all, I'm very sorry for the loss of Ben. I am totally convinced no one's fault, and not anyone's fault that he had COPD or cancer, and not anyone's fault that he made the choice that he did to try to end that. Not directed at anyone's fault, and anyone in the family. And second, and I'm sure that had he been able to stay healthy and healthy in body and mind, he would have loved to continue to participate, with each of you in his own way of keeping connection with the family. And he just made his own decision that the burden was too heavy to bear. And that isn't anyone else's fault. And then secondarily, in the thing, to commend all of you, for doing your best coming out of, what I can tell, even at, a 100-yard distance, was a contentious family relationship growing up. It's hard to have a divorce, even when, parents are on good terms with each other and things like that, and remarriages and blended families. And you all navigated that and have been doing your best, and clearly want to maintain, especially I certainly heard two brothers say, boy, I wish we could just put this behind us and get on with life. I totally understand that. And I hope this is at least a step in that direction. I realize there could be, further arguments made in the probate court as to, who gets what. But I would like to commend everyone on dealing with, these are crises. Mental illness is a crisis, terminal illness is a crisis, and suicide is a crisis for any family. And that doesn't matter if you're, the Gates family worth billions of dollars, or, you're a family, that can barely put together the money to, do the final funeral expenses and things like that. Crises hit families like that. And the main thing is you've all dealt with it yourselves personally, and you've tried to, in your best way that you can, hold together the relationships. I'd like to encourage that going forward. The one thing that I am certain about is that familial relationships, they don't, just like you're stuck with your parents, you're stuck with your siblings and family members. So, those relationships to maintain, and I'd encourage, and you may never be best of friends, but, just striking up as cordial and connected a relationship as you can will be great for all of you and your extended families as well. So I wish you the best. And again, my sincere condolences on the loss of, your brother. I can't imagine the tragedy and sadness that must have been for everyone. So, and again, like I say, y'all did your best in dealing with that, the best you could at the time. So, hope my ruling, at least in some way, reflects that. I guess, Mr. Rebel, do you want to draft an order to that effect?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, why don't we do
You're-
that?
And just for procedurally, Your Honor, Mr. Rebel, I'm happy to stipulate to it if you want to send it to me, if you want to do the 7 day.
Of course, yeah. I'll put something together after the hearing and I'll send it over to you and we can tweak it if we need to.
Thank
Good.
you.
And my goal was to be clear. Like I say, I kind of know the least about the dynamic of everyone sitting in the room. I'm just trying to be fair from, the law's perspective. So, and again, my personal condolences to y'all for everything you've been through. And with that, we are concluded.
Thank you, Your Honor.